Yes, the moderator is trying to join, he's joining us.
Kipratish, is he able to join? Because we have already lost almost 15 minutes.
Yeah, he's trying to join. I'm in talks with him. Huh?
I can see Melda is in the room. Maybe she can take it up as we wait for the moderator to join, because we have already lost time.
Okay, because I'm seeing also. Okay, let me contact
Hello, how are you?
Well, Reverend, how are you?
I am very well. Fred, I seem to have been lost in the big meeting and I've just managed to come back. I'm very sorry for the delay. I even was there with Anupi. I don't know whether Evelyn Anupi has managed to sneak out like I did. And thank you for the technical team who have managed to do that. So because we have lost a bit of time, let us proceed quickly to our agenda for today. Our group today is the role of education in training and harnessing the demographic dividend. My name is Reverend Chris Kinyanjui. I'm moderating the discussions today. We are to discuss three objectives. One is to highlight the role of education in training and preparing of young people to contribute to the socioeconomic transformation of Kenya. And number two is to share the challenges and opportunities in the provision of universal quality basic education in Kenya. And number three is to provide evidence in the impact of education and training on poverty alleviation. We all know that Kenya's demographic dividend window of opportunity is expected to open in 2038. And therefore, the country should take full advantage of this opportunity, especially in terms of the nation's future labor force must be well educated, well skilled, so that we can enhance economic productivity. The nation's socioeconomic transformation agenda, as envisioned in Vision 2030, requires education as a key pillar. So the presentations that we shall have from the Ministry of Education will highlight some of the areas and preparation of the young people to fully utilize their skills and knowledge. And therefore, the session audience will also get a synopsis of the challenges and the opportunities that Kenya has in the education and training sector. In addition to this, evidence will also be shared to show the importance of education and training in alleviating poverty, improving the quality of life of the population at the end of this session. It is expected that the country's impetus to improve education and training will be enhanced. We have very able presenters today. The first one will be Frederick Mujumba, who I can already see here. Frederick Mujumba is an educationist with 27 years of experience in the public sector, partly as a teacher, as a lecturer, and also in the education, in the Ministry of Education. He holds a postgraduate diploma in leadership development, an ICT and knowledge society. He has an MBA in finance and a bachelor's degree in technology education. He joins us today to give us a presentation. The second one will be Joseph Wasikhongo. I hope Joseph is here. Is Joseph Wasikhongo around?
Yes, I am around.
Good. Yes, Joseph Wasikhongo is an advocacy and capacity building professional with interest in education and gender. He is an alumni of the University of Nairobi and Egerton with 15 years experience in the field of development. He is the national coordinator for Elimu Yetu Coalition, which is an organization established to champion the provision of quality education in Kenya. He has previously also worked with the International Child Support. We'll also have Evelyn Anupi. Evelyn Anupi is the one I told you I left in the big forum. I hope the technical team will get her here on time. Then we have Margaret Wanjohi. I hope, Margaret, you are here. Margaret?
Yes, I am.
Yes, Margaret is an expert in advocacy. She has worked in the education sector and joins us to give us one of the presentations with regard to how education affects livelihoods. She works with Innovation for Poverty Action, an NGO in Kenya. So let's go straight to the presentation. I will ask Frederick Mujumba to be the first to go. And since we have lost a bit of time, I would say that we try and squeeze within the 10 minutes so that we have a bit of plenary. Frederick Mujumba, it's your time.
Thank you, Reverend, and thank you everybody for joining us. I'll be just making a short presentation on preparing Kenya's future human resource for socioeconomic transformation. This basically deals with looking at the students in basic education and enabling them to be better human resources in the future. The presentation will take the form as outlined. There'll be introduction, organization of basic education, and challenges and opportunities to expanding basic education. I move on. Again, move on. And introducing, I will just look at largely what is the Kenya's development. What does it depend on? In two major areas. Natural resources, of course, these enable us to create a bit of wealth for ourselves in terms of the fertile lands that we have, forest wealth, good river systems, minerals and oils, and then a good climate. The second one, which is major to us, is human capital, which entails having well-educated, skillful, and well-trained people. In this essence, I mean that human capital will refer to individuals' capacity to be able to be productive. Individuals with more human capital are likely to receive higher pay, and that is what we aim at, that we should make them more productive so that they will achieve higher pay and therefore lead to social economic development. Next. An effective human capital is increased due to the investments that are provided in education, training, and healthcare. Investment in human capital normally would come out in three forms. We get youth who are employable, who can be entrepreneurs, or who can be employers themselves. So then access and participation to education and training becomes a key component in development of human capital. Move on. Because of the element of education being very important, then government of Kenya invests basically education as a foundational level. I'm highlighting some of the resources that have been utilized. The resources are in millions of shillings. Compare them with what is being provided at the education sector. You notice that basic education seems to take a chunk of the funds as a result of part of it being management at ministry level, and secondly being provision of instructions. That is done by the Teacher Service Commission. In terms of organization of the basic education, then we have a cycle that is well known as 844 cycle, which is currently ongoing, but then we are shifting to a new cycle that is popularly known as the competency-based education system. However, it takes cognizance of the fact that we need sufficient foundational skills to be able to move people through the system so that we are able to get the right human resources. So we have early years education, middle school education, and senior school, tertiary and university. And the levels are shown for each level. They're like early years education, you'll have lower primary, and then pre-primary, that's what you call PP1 and PP2. And then lower primary, you have grade 1, grade 2, and grade 3, and that goes on up to grade 12 for senior secondary, where you're trying to create a bit of skills because it's necessary. Can move on. The basis for this new education system outlined that just a few I've mentioned here, that foundational skills are key, as I had emphasized, but more important is to shift focus from educational inputs and emphasize more on the educational outputs, and that is outcomes, and that's why we talk of competencies. Disparities that have been noticed in learning outcomes is a key thing that we would want to reduce. And then that the mere focus secondary education is becoming so critical in successfully entering the labor market. And there is need for more time at that level to consolidate the learning. And then the current knowledge that we need ICTs to be able to access and create knowledge becomes key, and therefore it is part of what is being integrated in the new education system. Move on. To be able to enhance access to basic education, as outlined, is a key thing. Then we give ourselves some targets and various slogans that we use to move on, like ensure no child is left behind in education system. We also strengthen our mold, mentoring, guidance, and counseling program to be able to support psychosocial support to the children. Many times you may find that children may come to school when they're not ready to learn. And so there is need to be able to do that and increase support for special needs education. Can go on. Now those interventions typically bring out an outcome, and the outcome is actually shown in the gross enrollment rates that appear are shown in the graph. We can see from this graph that class 6 becomes a critical point, as we call it grade 6, and that's why it is a target for intervention. Because you notice that from that end, there's a decline in enrollments, gross enrollment rates going towards class 8. However, we still proceed on with the programs that are used to enhance access, like free primary education, free day secondary education, feeding programs, provision of medical cover for secondary school students. All of them are insured by the NHIF, and deworming, more importantly, infrastructure development in schools. Can move on. There are certain blockages that do take place in education, and these are things we focus on. Like there are high poverty levels, and this could be one of the reasons why declines start taking place as you move to the higher part of the education system, majorly in secondary education. Teacher supply and quality, the disparities in teacher distribution are still persistent, and therefore reduce access to education. And opportunity costs, the element that parents mainly would want their children to work for them, and child labor becomes something that we need to tackle. And then inadequate financial resources, both at government level and individual parents. And that is why sometimes you may find access is difficult. In terms of challenges and opportunities, this will be better explained. Come over the next. Better explained by the distribution that we have in terms of the age. You notice that from the data that was provided by Kenya Bureau of Statistics, following the census of 2019, we have a total of probably 3.7 million students, in million children in ages of 3 to 5 years, 2.9, 4.9, 4 to 5. Along the line, you find that some of them are not in school, some of them have never gone to school. And so as you follow through the continent, we notice that we'll end up with a situation where we have an educated workforce and an educated workforce. Those who have less than secondary education are regarded as being uneducated, and those who have secondary education and above are regarded as educated. And so this just shows that our challenges are great in ensuring that we really have to provide education to a number of children in this country. And next. The challenges then can be summarized as indicated that for us to be able to enhance basic education, then we have to focus on developing relevant knowledge and skills, ensuring high skill teaching workforce, providing flexibility in education system, financing education with equity, ensuring equity, because as you can see from the graph, there is a decline in the enrollment percentage of access as you move towards the upper parts of basic education, Form 4. Next. Our challenges then will be how then do we improve teacher and classroom attendance to enhance learning outcomes, ensure coherence towards learning, that we have so many actors in education and the need for them to really focus on learning is very essential. Then assessments that are continuous and multi-level and strengthening of managerial and instructional capacity within the institution. Opportunities, therefore, that present themselves that at early learning, childhood development, we have ability to enhance this and ensure that we reach universal levels, primary and secondary level as well, so long as we take into consideration what we have. Equal access to TVET, because TVET, part of the TVET programs are now being, will now be provided basically at upper secondary or senior school level, where they can be able to choose some of the programs, and then focusing on how we can enhance gender equality, equity, and inclusion in education. So in conclusion, then I would just say that we have chosen a future for the children in Kenya, because we are able to see that good health will be very essential. And we are mainly focusing on how then we can ensure the child is not like the one on the left, but the one on the right. Next. So we can say that as we move towards demographic transition, then we are looking at the current reforms being able to enhance skills, but then also trying to address disparities to ensure inclusive education to access will be key towards achieving a much needed demographic dividends. That is the end. Thank you for listening to me. Hello.
The chair is muted.
Chair is muted. Hello.
Sorry. Thank you very much, Mujumba. I got muted and I couldn't unmute quickly. For that very in-depth analysis of the basic education. I don't know whether we have Evelyn and Anupi from the State Department of Basic Education.
Good afternoon, Chair. Yes, I'm in the room. Thank you.
Good. Now, I had already introduced you in your absence and said that we'll have you join us. And we have just gone through the preparing the future human resource for socio-economic transformation. Please take us through the next presentation. Evelyn.
Thank you. So my presentation will be on enhancing employability and life skills of Kenya's youth for improved productivity. And again, I'll be focusing mostly on TVET. So from my slides, I'm going to look at the characteristics of youth in Kenya, the institutional framework, the current policies, experiences, successes, and way forward. Move to the next slide, please. When we look at the characteristics, and again, as the other presenters have pointed out, we notice that Kenya has a youthful population, with the youth constituting about 1/3 of the population, and they account for about 40% of the working population. On the positive side, we note that the youth are driving some of the key sectors in the country, and more specifically, the information, communication, and technology sector. However, again, we note that unemployment amongst the youth population is high, with most of them feeling marginalized in terms of access to opportunities, representation, and participation. For the Kenyan scenario, education and training that we are offering our youth is not adequately being translated into productive employment in the current environment. Therefore, the major question that we have, how do we improve the quality of jobs to meet the aspirations of the youth through sustainable programs? Move on. So as I had discussed, the youth bulge, we know that we have a youthful population, and approximately 800,000 youth enter the labor market annually. And this therefore tells us that we really need to focus on the youth. So we move to our second question and ask ourselves, has the positive macroeconomic development translated into benefits for the youth? We know that the country has been performing well, although with a mixture of performance at times going up and down, but we want to see some of these benefits are benefiting the youth. Move to the next slide. So for us to realize that, we know that education and training plays a critical role. However, as I mentioned earlier on from a number of studies, the kind of training and education that the youth are receiving has not armed them with appropriate skills that employers seek, nor the adequate skills that they require for innovativeness and entrepreneurship. We also note that those who are employed, majority of them are absorbed in the informal sector, which is characterized by low quality and vulnerable jobs. On the rural-urban migration, again, we note that most of the youth are no longer in the rural areas. They have migrated into the urban areas in search of employment. Move on. Therefore, we need to avail the youth with appropriate education and skills and training in order to improve or increase their suitability for employment, as well as to enable them to be self-reliant. Lack of the right skills, we have noted that it is delaying the youth from securing employment. For example, at the university level, you find them staying in the house for more than a year, and even at the TVET level, the earliest that we find them are getting into gainful engagement is 6 months. In the country and even outside, employers prefer youth who are well-trained and equipped with the necessary skills, including the soft skills, values, spirituality, life skills, as social and emotional aptitude. Therefore, as we continue training, it is not only on the classroom training, but we need to have all-rounded youth who can fit in the society. In the country, we have policies that facilitate youth employment. We look at our constitution, and through the constitution, the right to free primary or basic education is enshrined in our constitution. Again, we recognize that most of the skills that the youth require to actively participate in the economy are required at the TVET level of training. And for them to get the right skills, they need to have the right internship and industrial attachment programs, as well as to be exposed under business incubation. Our challenges is that we have policies and initiatives towards the youth, but again, we really need to align those policies so that they can communicate to one another and they require financing. Move on. Next. The reforms in education and training, we are saying that for us to train the youth and equip them with the right skills, we require to equip and facilitate them by creating a safe, conducive, and enabling environment through which they can gain knowledge, skills, resource opportunities, and confidence, participate in decision-making, as well as implement the programs that are specifically tailor-made for them. And for us to do that, we need to strengthen the linkage between academia and industry so that as we train the youth, they are able to get the skills that the industry requires. Move on. So we are aware of the COVID-19 pandemic. This particular scenario has affected the country negatively, and the youth were most hit during this particular pandemic, which we are still facing. At school level, again, we find that due to lack of adequate ICT infrastructure and the nature of TVET training, in some circumstances, we were not able to adequately continue with the training. Again, we find that the segment of women and the low income segments in the country were also affected. However, with the COVID-19, again, for TVET, we were able to exploit some of the opportunities that we didn't know our youth possess. For example, making of those ICU beds, our youth in TVET institutions were able to do that. The hand sanitizers, they were able to do that. The hand washing facilities, again, that is an area that we saw our TVET institutions come up strongly. Move on to the next one. So reforms in TVET, we know that reforms in TVET started in the year 2000, and the reforms came about due to some of the great challenges that we had. A large number of young people were graduating from secondary schools, and they didn't have other places to go to apart from university, which were limited or not adequate. A curriculum in majority of the TVET institutions was theory-based, and we required to move to the competency-based education and training. The supply and the demand side were not communicating to one another. Therefore, TVET was channeling graduates, which were not required by the labor market. Enrollment in TVET was down due to the negative perception, TVET being a second choice for most of the youth. And again, with the Vision 2030, we found that the TVET curriculum was not properly aligned to the national development needs in the country. Move on. Therefore, with the reforms in TVET, we focused on access, we focused on equity, relevance, and quality. And through this, we had the TVET Act, which was enacted in the year 2013. Push on. Under access, we have seen gains through capitation, whereby the government gives Kenya shillings 30,000 for every TVET trainee annually. Again, we have the Higher Education Loans Board, which is supporting the most vulnerable. Construction of TVET institution in constituencies. This is an initiative that we have been pursuing. And so far, we have a total of 200 public TVET institutions, 11 national polytechnics, and 4 TVET special institution colleges, as well as 1 TVET trainer college. Enrollment has been on the rise. And for national polytechnics and TVCs, we are now at 270,000. For the vocational training centers, or commonly known as youth polytechnics, we are at 130,000. And for the private TVET institutions, currently we have 80,000. Again, we have made gains under relevance and quality through the rollout of the CBET, focusing on industrial linkages. We keep on supplying state-of-the-art equipment to our TVET institutions. We have been upgrading equipment in the national polytechnics and all the other levels of training. And again, we were able to operationalize the regulatory agencies, that is the TVET Authority, the TVET CDAC, and the Kenya National Qualification Authority. However, we have some challenges. Mostly we want to focus on CBET. For us to fully implement CBET effectively, we are having a challenge of inadequate and outdated physical infrastructure and equipment. We are lacking adequate qualified trainers and professionals. And then the second challenge, we are having a mismatch between trainings offered at the actual demand and what is required by industry. At the quality of TVET programs, I have talked about that. So for us to do that, we are looking at the negative perception, which as the ministry, you have been working through rebranding and government support to ensure that the youth as well as the parents view TVET as their first choice. So again, we look at the trainers for TVET. Currently, we are upgrading the Kenya Technical Trainers College. And we have ensured that the other courses will not be offered there. We just want to focus on research and capacity building for the trainers. Again, we are developing the TVET blueprint, which will guide investment in TVET. Move on. Again, we have done the centers of excellence in 26 TVET institutions. We have developed a policy on recognition of prior learning and we are rolling it out. We have developed an app on tracer studies so that we can be able to know where our TVET graduates move to after graduation. And again, we are strengthening the incubation and production units in our TVET institutions. Move on. Use of technology, as I said, we are improving on the internet infrastructure in all our TVET institutions. We are rolling out the TVET Management Information System, which will be able to give us real-time data and for policy management issues. At TVET clustering, we want to ensure that every county has a national polytechnic, and that particular national polytechnic is going to serve the TVET, the technical vocational training centers at sub-county levels. And again, the vocational training centers, that is the youth polytechnics, will be anchored on the national polytechnics. Move on. So as we have been playing in the TVET spectrum, we have learned a number of lessons as highlighted there, that to tackle Kenya's high youth unemployment, the private sector, the academia, and the government must work together to develop innovative business models, strengthen industry linkages, and ensure that we offer competency-based education and training. Again, building a strong foundation for human capital development, and this would ensure that we boost earnings for the youth. We are focusing on a balanced approach encompassing building skills and raising productivity, and again, enhancing partnership. Move on. Again, we have realized that we have knowledge gaps. For example, some of the initiatives being implemented, such as the Kazi kwa Vijana and the Youth Enterprise Development, we really need to sit down and synchronize to ensure that as our youth are going to participate in these particular initiatives, the money that they are going to get from it can be invested for them to buy startup kits and to continue investing for their self-reliance. The poor access to government procurement opportunities. This particular initiative, again, is supporting our youth, but we would propose that it be strengthened. And next, we lack evidence through tracer studies for TVET. Therefore, without proper tracer studies, we are not able to know which are the specific areas that really absorb our TVET graduates, so that as we train, we focus on those particular specialties. Move on. So education and training is considered as a key element for better employment. And we need to focus on equipping our youth with relevant technical skills through TVET. And again, a major asset for national economies. When these young people are able to find appropriately paying employment or other ways of gaining personal economic independence, then we see those proceeds are being trickled into the overall economic growth. Move on. So again, on our lessons learned, we really require up-to-date employment statistics to guide us in planning. Labor market and skills assessments, this should be done again in the economy. Sectoral case studies and assessment, we are recommending that we strengthen this. And again, we need to conduct gender-sensitive assessments. Move on. Curricular review, I have talked about this. This is a continuous thing that we are going to do in the entire education and training. We need to promote supervised internships and apprenticeships, and we need to support the young people in creating their own employment opportunities and holistic programming for Kenya's youth employment challenge with unbiased approaches. We need to establish information hubs, and ICT is very critical there. And we also notice that training for employers to have capacity and infrastructure to create inclusive jobs. We have to provide a working environment that is safe, inclusive, and support personal development. And for us to do this, we need collaboration between national government, county government, as well as the private sector. So with all these initiatives, my parting shot is that our dream is to ensure that 100% of youth graduating from high schools are able to transit to TVET. And at TVET level, we are able to equip them with the relevant skills and attitudes for them to get self-employment as well as be employed in the economy. Thank you very much. That is my end of the presentation.
Good, thank you. Thank you very much, Evelyn Anupi from the State Department of TVET for that wonderful presentation. We'll now proceed to Elimu Coalition, Mr. Joseph Wasikhongo, who is going to present to us the quality basic education for all, Kenya's challenges and opportunities. Welcome, Wasikhongo.
Thank you very much, Reverend, for giving me that opportunity. And first and foremost, I appreciate the opportunity to participate in this important National Leaders Conference on Population and Development, and specifically to speak as a panelist on quality basic education for all, Kenya challenges and opportunities. I work for Yetu Coalition, and I'm here to represent the CSO community. But first, before I make my remarks, I just want to appreciate the presentations that have been made by Frederick Mujumba, as well as Evelyn. I think we have gotten foundational information, and to a large extent, they speak to the presentation that I'll be making today. I like both presentations, one as being foundational, and second, sharing the vision for the youth, for the country. What I'm going to share, since most of it has been touched here and there, I will make a subtle point in my presentation that kind of links those two presentations, or the foundations that those two presentations were based on. One, I begin by appreciating that the Constitution of Kenya, 2010, guarantees every child the right to free, compulsory quality basic education. So indeed, Articles 43 and 53 and 55 make education a right for every Kenyan, while the Kenya Vision 2030 underscores the importance of education towards relevant human and social capital for sustainable development. But despite these aspirations, we have challenges. They are still rife, and most of them have been shared. But quickly, we have got issues around inadequate infrastructure, teacher shortage, gender disparities in terms of access, pre-existing barriers for some regions in Kenya that continue to disadvantage the population on education. And we have challenges coping with contemporary issues such as matters related to COVID-19. We have low learning outcomes. We have access and quality issues around ECDE. We have governance challenges on issues of transparency and accountability, low ICT uptake challenges, as has been noted, and also the sector reels with the challenge of having inadequate data and evidence. But despite this, I say that it is important for the government to commit to provide quality basic education for all. And this I say for two reasons. One, quality basic education, as has been observed, is a fundamental right. And as such, the burden for its provision lies with the state, and it is only the state that has instruments to enforce that right. Now, secondly, commitment towards the provision of quality basic education is key to reaping the youth demographic dividend that Kenya presents. Those are 2 points that I believe are important for the government to commit to provision of quality basic education. Now, granted, the provision of quality basic education is costly. Investment is necessary, and huge investment, covering curriculum costs, including provision of learning materials, infrastructure, acquisition and development of the teaching force, funding examination and assessment regimes, recruitment of quality assurance personnel, and this applies to both conventional and inclusive forms of education. So, granted, the provision of quality education is costly. And there is no better way to provide this proof by looking at it from the fact that though the government of Kenya allocates huge amounts of money towards education, the bulk of the same just goes to cover recurrent expenditure, with little being directed towards development. For example, in the FY 2020 and 2021, a recurrent expenditure of 479.1 billion, constituting around 96.2% of the allocation, was realized against a development expenditure of 18.7 billion, which was around 3.76% of the allocation. So you can see the costly nature, very little going into development. Now, this underscores the fact that one of the greatest challenges within the sector is its financing. The case of Kenya, though, education enjoys the highest allocation as observed, and this allocation is above the globally recommended 20% of the total government expenditure. However, despite this, we are not able to address the challenges within the sector. So what does this mean? This means then the size of the budget matters. If the size of the budget is small, it does not matter the allocation share that the sector gets. It will still be inadequate. The budget can only be sufficient if the government is able to mobilize and allocate sufficient funding, and this can be boosted if the tax collection base is expanded. Now, this brings me to the question of the youth. Now, according to ILO estimate, 66% of employment in sub-Saharan Africa is in the informal sector. Now, most sources will put the figure higher than 70% for Kenya. Now, meaning that only about 34% or 30% are in the formal sector and therefore pay meaningful taxes. According to our host, based on data of 2017, over 80% of the population are below the age of 35 years of age. This renders the majority of the youth, as observed a little bit earlier, as having no stable economic opportunities, are unemployed, they're discouraged, and are vulnerable. Now, this means that any education that is rendered effective in Kenya must partly be identified by its ability to address the youth question or the youth agenda. Quality education, therefore, must be one that leads Kenya towards the realization of the demographic dividend opportunity that is afforded by the high youth population. Now, this is critical. We cannot talk about quality education if it does not address the youth question or the youth agenda. Therefore, what I am saying is that the government needs to recommit to provide this form of quality education. And it can do this by, one, embracing the big picture. And what is the big picture? The big picture is that we have a bulging youth population within a ubiquitous informal sector. Now, secondly, recognizing the fact that provision of this quality basic education successfully is a direct route towards expanding the tax base. Perhaps this commitment can be manifested through the government investing, one, in appropriate education systems that afford opportunities for the youth to be gainfully engaged through either competing in the job market or creating their own jobs. I really love the presentation of Evelyn, especially in terms of what is being done with regards to matters related to the youth. Now, secondly, in processes that fosters innovation among the youth, this is critical because it can enable them to get into large informal initiatives or even formal ones, resulting in bigger businesses. And this, in turn, expanding the tax base collection source for the government. The government needs to invest in systems that do not only build the skills for the youth for now, but also prepares the youth for the future as global citizens. It is a fact that younger Kenyans are more educated than the previous generations and therefore are comfortable with even embracing new technologies. The government also needs to invest in processes that put in place an education system that is inclusive and not leaving anyone behind, irrespective of their gender. And the vision and the aspirations through the two presentations actually point towards the direction that this is something that an attempt is being done to get realized. This, however, cannot be adequately be done. We cannot succeed in getting this to be done if we do not understand or see a particular feedback or connection loop. We must be able to see the connection between the larger vision, which is the provision of quality basic education for every child as a right, the generation of employment and entrepreneurship opportunities for the youth, the relationship this has with the youth paying taxes, this resulting in the expansion of the tax base, this resulting in the increase in the general size of the budget, and this resulting in the increased share for the allocation to the education sector for further investment to quality education. If this feedback loop is not seen, is not identified by our leaders, then we are still going to lose the battle. Now, Kenya, as has been indicated by the two previous presenters, we may be on the right path. As you know, we are now implementing the new competency-based curriculum, having moved from the 844, and parts of 844 are still being implemented. Now, as you also know, the objective of the competency-based education is to prepare individuals for the challenges for the future, empower students with knowledge and skills in various fields of studies, in a flexible educational program tailored for each student. We know that several pathways are provided: college education, talent development, and TVET. And as you know, the system at the moment is at grade 4, it's headed to 5. With these pathways, it is possible for the youth to take charge of their own destiny, because for the very first time, it is about them. And by doing this, the education system shall be addressing the youth agenda. But the government needs to stay the course. And how can this be? The youth should be mobilized to participate in policy discourses. Inclusive strategies need to be embraced to ensure that both young men and women are involved from all types of communities, including those that have been traditionally marginalized. There should be meaningful consultations and collaborations among stakeholders, including state and non-state actors. This initiative, like the one we are involved in, is very crucial. Now, within the education sector, especially during this very difficult moment of COVID-19, now the civil society needs to be encouraged to remain vibrant and participate in educational policy processes and holding the government to account, both for commitments it has made and its responsibilities. From the two previous presentations, we see massive and beautiful commitments. Now, part of our role as a civil society is to hold the government to account to these beautiful aspirations. Now, EYC, Elimu Yetu coalition, we are ready to engage in any forms of partnerships with anybody to foster this kind of development in Kenya. But in summary, as I finalize, now one, I'm saying the provision of quality basic education has its challenges, but it also has opportunities. I'm looking at the opportunities a little bit different. Now we have the opportunity of seeing the big picture in the context that if we provide quality basic education, then we are going to expand the tax base. And because this is a huge tax generation trap for the government. Now, we have the opportunity to look at the youth agenda and tell ourselves that so long as the education we provide is not of quality, we are not going to address the youth question or the youth agenda. And in the process, we are not going to reap the demographic dividend brought forth by the high population of the youth. Now, we also have the opportunity of fostering and building up our ability to appreciate and recognize that feedback loop I had talked about. That connection, especially by our leaders, must be seen. That connection between quality education, youth empowerment, generation of taxes for service provision, going back to the education sector to provide for quality education. Because in doing this, then we are going to witness success. We have the opportunity of getting into partnerships comprising of various stakeholders for the purpose of improving the quality of education, especially targeting our child. We have an opportunity with people coming together, resources being injected, having an opportunity to run our education system in an open, transparent, and accountable manner so that we are responsible not only to ourselves, but even for the generations to come. Because by utilizing our opportunities and providing basic quality education, we make real our potential as a country to reap the youth demographic dividend opportunity that is presented to us. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much, Joseph, for that wonderful presentation on the challenges in the basic education for all. Now we have the final presentation by IPA, Innovation for Poverty Action. We now welcome Madam Margaret Wanjohi to give us the presentation. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Margaret Wanjohi for Poverty Action as the Policy Manager for the Women's Work, Entrepreneurship and Skilling Initiative. I don't know, is Massive sharing the screen?
Not yet. Please share the screen. Yes, there you are.
No, that is not my presentation. I think I'll give her 2 minutes to figure that out.
Yes, Margaret's presentation was on the impact of education and training on poverty reduction efforts. Yes, as we wait for that, please, if you have any question on any of the panelists, please post it on the chat. And if you want to ask it orally, I can see we only have 21 minutes. We'll be able to have it done. Over to you. I hope this is the one. Margaret?
Yes, this is it. Yes.
Yes, yeah.
Sorry,
Please go
Chair,
ahead.
are you able to see the presentation now?
Yes, we can see the presentation. Perhaps you can click on the view presentation. Yes, that way. Go ahead, Margaret.
Thank you, Bernard. Just to give you a brief of what IPA does for better understanding of our research and evidence-based policy model ahead of the presentation. IPA is a global organization that operates in 21 countries across the world, working closely with the primarily governments to do two things. First, we create high quality evidence, and then we help turn that evidence into better policies and programs for the poor. So those of you that attended the breakout session on data and innovation will, I'm sure, understand and agree on the criticality of creating a nexus between researchers and policymakers in the search for evidence-based policy. And this is what IPA does. So we carry out various programs. We carry out research across various program areas, agriculture, education, finance, governance, health, peace and recovery, as well as small and medium enterprises. And our strategic model is defined as encompassing three components. So I'd say creating stronger evidence through designing evaluations, the actual gaps and knowledge areas identified. And then we share this evidence strategically and equip policymakers to use this evidence by building their capacity of decision makers effective use of evidence. So on your screen, you will see that in accordance with the demographic dividend roadmap, our presentation is centered around the education and skills development roadmap. And we will be contributing to key action 4, which states adopt a life course approach to learning that encompasses a wide range of subjects and topics, including livelihood skills, through the incorporation of life skills in the secondary and tertiary levels. And I think it's only prudent at this level that I should recognize the presence of our implementing partner, Educate, at this event, Donnelly Donaldson. Great to see you here, Donnelly. Next slide. Bernard, next slide. We are operating in a context that already has significant structural inequalities in terms of youth advancement and gender. Previous slide, Bernard. Yeah, so as I said, we are in a context that already has significant structural inequalities in terms of youth advancement and I dare say even social inclusion. In 2020, USAID in their global gender gap report ranked Kenya 109 out of 153 countries, highlighting that we have significant inequalities between males and females in, firstly, educational attainment, health outcomes, representation in parliament, as well as participation in the labor market. It's essential that we recognize that women and girls play a vital role in promoting healthy, peaceful, and economically prosperous communities. However, this group of people face widespread gender-based inequalities and discrimination. And this solves in the form of exclusion from markets and services, disproportionate unpaid domestic barriers to sexual and reproductive health services and agency, as well as gender-based violence. And that has caused women to lag behind men in their participation in the labor market. and there is still a conspicuous gap in wage and non-wage income. Notably, the efficacy of our education system in terms of wholesome skill development is a huge determinant of how the gap is going to be breached. So what we're saying is that for policies or programs, they will need to take into account the underlying gender-specific contextuals, which are such as existing social norms, time constraints, imbalances in care responsibilities, structural barriers that limit business experience, as well as the dynamic household ownership and control of assets. Next slide. As he slide, I will say that in slide 2, I highlighted the education and skills road primary focus of this presentation. But we have also found that the evidence today that we have in the form of the Educate Experience program aligns with the employment and entrepreneurship roadmap through Key Action 5 as well, which states develop and support transformative initiatives towards building entrepreneurial skills and capacities of African youth. Next slide. So how do we build entrepreneurs and life skills for success? The proposed national population policy highlights one major policy issue, which is that entrepreneurs face a rapidly changing market. They lack the education skills and work experience that is necessary to run successful businesses, and especially often lag behind men in these skills and experiences. The potential solutions that we bring forth are from studies from Kenya, Ethiopia, Togo, and Uganda, indicating that soft skills training and innovative business training programs with gender intentional content show promise in building the skills that entrepreneurs need to innovate and adapt to challenges ahead. These solutions are, this context that I've outlined, that is Kenya, Ethiopia, Togo, and Uganda, economically and culturally homogeneous to this country, and therefore evidence generated could inform best case replication in this country as well. Next slide. So we are highlighting the Educate Experience program as a promising intervention. Educate is a social leadership and social entrepreneurship skills development program across East Africa. And the research that we are highlighting was conducted by Laura Chioda and Paul Gatler, both UC Berkeley. And the specific policy concern here is that youth face challenges in securing employment or decent work opportunities, and they often lack the entrepreneurial skills required to operate their own small businesses. The Educate Experience program is a leadership skills development intervention for youth, and we will focus on its implementation in Ugandan secondary schools. It's focused on social leadership, soft skills, development, and basic elements of social entrepreneurship and business management. The program teaches youth soft skills that include both interpersonal and intrapersonal skills. The interpersonal skills are such as communication and teamwork, as well as intrapersonal skills, such as confidence, critical thinking, creativity, and grit. These sessions teach an interactive style and are student-centered. They require students to practice class group work and activities. Notably, this method of teaching is in stark contrast to the standard Ugandan passive learning methods. This program is implemented during the last 2 years of secondary schools and delivered by practically trained youth mentors. It has 3 main components. 1, 35 entrepreneurship and leadership course, one-on-one personal development mentorship and group mentorship once every term. And then there are also student business clubs. And how the evaluation was conducted was that there was cluster randomized evaluation over a 4-year period, and then a subsequent 8-year follow-up period that is supposed to end in this year of 2021. Then participants were randomly assigned to 48 schools. They were stratified by district across 6 districts to comparison groups or to treatment groups. And we had 1,942 students that participated in that study. Next slide.
Yes, Margaret, are you going on? Are you done? Bernard, have we lost Margaret?
I think she has dropped out, Chair.
Okay, okay. Thank you. Thank you for that info. Let's wait for her to come back. But as we wait, I think it's good that we come to a close. We have 11 minutes that are remaining. And I can already see there are some comments that we have received. So far, I have not received any question as such, but I'm sure maybe there's anyone that has a question would like to have. We have a comment from Imelda, which perhaps goes to Mujumba and Evelyn, which talks about we have almost 100% or 100% transition from primary to secondary, and transition to university is clear since learners receive admission letters. However, transition to tertiary and TVET seems to have a gap. How can we explore ways of dealing with this gap of transition to TVET? How do we make TVET relevant to the younger generation? That's one question that I think I'll ask Mujumba and Evelyn to prepare. And we have Frederick Akinyi, who wanted to say, who said that perhaps I want to hear how education and training can be used to effect impactful change in population management, especially for the youth and adolescents. That's from Frederick Akinyi. I'm not very sure whether Margaret is back. Anybody with a question or a comment that is not written there? We have a few minutes for that. Well, if there's no one, perhaps I will ask Evelyn to go first with regard to transition to TVET. I think to add that is also the numbers. How many people, how many students do you have in the TVET right now? And what is the ideal situation in terms of numbers? Evelyn?
Thank you, Chair. Indeed, in TVET, we've been having a challenge of low enrollment. However, in the recent past, maybe 3 or 4 years, we have been aggressively pursuing rebranding and repositioning of TVET. This has been done through construction and equipping of TVET. If any one of you has gone around the TVET institutions, you can see the quality of equipment that we have supplied in those institutions. Indeed, that has bore some fruits. From last year and the other year, you could see that some of the Form 4 leavers who attained grades of B+ and above, they opted to join the TVET institutions. What this means is that our rebranding and repositioning strategy has worked very well, and the negative perception that was there in TVET has drastically gone down. We are still committed to continue with this rebranding and repositioning. And the other aspect that we are going to pursue is strengthening the linkage between TVET and secondary schools. And we are going to do this by ensuring that the career guidance offices that are in the secondary schools, we talk to them, because you find that as those students approach Form 4, most of them are just thinking about applying to university education. But we are past that, and we want to tell them that as you do your Form 4 examination, also think about the TVET institutions. Through the tracer studies, we have evidence that we are showing them that once you graduate from a TVET institution, the longest period of time that you are going to stay looking for a job is 6 months. So instead of going to the university to take a course, which will make you stay tamarking for 4 or 5 years, pursue a TVET institution course. You will take a shorter time. We know the government or the country is in dire need of those skills. For example, plumbing. We have a shortage of plumbers. Somebody goes and does the plumbing course, they come out of the training institution and the job is readily available. Even if they are not going to get employed with the startup kits, they are able to do their own self-engagement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Evelyn. Mujumba, I hope you have something to add to that in terms of transition and in terms of ensuring that we make technical education attractive to the youth.
Thank you, Chair. Indeed, at basic education level, we have 100% transition from primary to secondary. However, as you go further, you will notice that the higher echelons in education are electives. They require that people select various areas that they would want to engage in, because it is at this point that they transit to the world of work. So at that point, there is no major program for actual transition. Although there has been biasness towards university because of the element that at university level, we had a placement service that would provide career booklets so that everyone can be able to see what careers. That's the same thing that was lacking for TVET. I think that would be a major milestone if they were to provide career guidance at that level. But again, now following the enactment of the Universities Act, then the placement service enjoined TVET, and therefore now we have transitions both to university and to TVET. So it is something that is going to change. I also wanted to make a comment on somebody who asked how education and training be used to effect impactful change on population management, necessarily for the youth and adolescents. One of the things we highlighted here is that education and training leads to higher human capital, which increases the productivities of an individual. Therefore, that leads to higher earnings. And when that happens, then you know, they'll be able to take care of whatever number of children that they will get, and more so, then we can be able to get higher taxation and use it to be able to manage our population in this country. There is also an element of more time being spent in education, especially for girls, reducing the sexual activity and therefore enabling them not to have children at an early age, and that manages the population. And therefore, the last one is the knowledge and skills that are provided through education and training enable youth and adolescents to plan their families and therefore make informed decisions. Thank you, Chair.
Good, thank you very much, Mujumba, and for that comment. We have Margaret back, so I'll give you a chance to complete the presentation. I can see we only have about 2 minutes. Please go ahead, Margaret.
Okay, thank you. I was concluding on the preliminary results of the Educate Experience program. And the first result is that we've had positive impacts on educational outcomes. Educate participants were more likely to have graduated from secondary school, and female graduates were also more likely to be enrolled in or to have completed tertiary education. And then the program also succeeded in improving skills associated with leadership, creativity, persuasion, pro-sociality, as well as managing stress. The program generated positive social spillovers, including delayed family formation, less risky behavior, in that participants had fewer sexual partners. And there were also shifts in gender social norms and reductions in intimate partner violence. Notably, the program has had limited impacts on knowledge of hard skills. And at the point of the 4-year follow-up, 35% of the sample were still in school. So it's too soon to measure the labor market outcomes. The researchers are actively investigating the long-term impact of educate intervention on women's labor market outcomes and their ability to navigate the challenges of the COVID-19 crisis. So I'd say that in the Ugandan case, the educate intervention has provided meaningful, lasting increases in soft skills. It has delivered positive and lasting social spillovers, and it has increased educational outcomes. So the takeaway is that soft skills associated with entrepreneurial success are malleable, they can be taught, and their improvements persist for years afterwards. Yeah, thank you.
Good, thank you. Thank you very much, Margaret, for that. I'm sure some of these studies you can share with some of the participants or maybe with the council so that they can guide other actors in the sector. There are more questions that have been taken. I think they need to be captured in the report that have come through the chat. I hope, Bernard, you'll be able to pick them, especially with regard to how do we involve the youth in the sector that is now emerging for technology, computer dispensation, and so on, and how TVET can also start teaching young people these classes like coding and other computer development programs. So our time is gone, and I wish you all the best as we join the conference tomorrow. So thank you very much, and God bless you.